Moshe Taragin here for the OU All Parsha video series. Speaking from Eretz Yisrael, from Gush Etzion, Parashat Balak. Parashat Balak has moral elements to it. The offset between Avraham and Bilam, Avraham Ayin Tova, Nefesh Shefela, Ruach Nemucha, humility, satisfied with limited resources, seeing the good in people. Bilam was Ayin Ra, Nefesh Rachava, Ruach Givoha. There is unfortunately, a theological story in Parashat Balak. It gets a little bit neglected at the end, where Am Yisrael, we'll call it Egel Part 2, falls prey to Peor in Shittim, and this time it's not 3,000-4,000 people who are killed, it's 24,000 people. But most of Parashat Balak is very historical, about Jewish history, Jewish mission, Jewish legacy. Bilam is hired by Balak to cast a spell, and instead he voices some of the most glorious, celebratory, and triumphant psukim about our people, about our love, the love between ourselves and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Every day we begin davening, we cite Bilam Matovu Ohalecha Yaakov Mishkin Osecha Yisrael. And those two phrases, Yaakov and Yisrael, flow through all of Bilam's nevuos. Now, what Yaakov means and what Yisrael means, it probably means, at the base level, that Yaakov refers to the state of the Jewish people when we struggle, when we're holding on to the heels of others and struggling for Jewish destiny. And Yisrael is when we have triumphed, whether it's the momentary triumph of Yaakov in Parshas Vayishlach when he's named Yisrael, or the ultimate Goal Yisrael. Not just Fada Yaakov, V'nemar Kivada Hashem es Yaakov, Ugialo miyad chazak umenu Baruch Hashem Goal Yisrael. Bilam makes it into Rosh Hashanah davening in the middle of Malchus. Lo hibit aven b'Yaakov, lo ra amol b'Yisrael, Hashem elokav imo useruas melech bo. Can't get away from Bilam. Bilam makes it into Jewish messianic history. Darach kochav miYaakov, v'kam shevet miYisrael. Again, the Yaakov and Yisrael, and Rabbi Akiva believed that this was a description of Mashiach, none other than Bar Kuziba, and the famous machlokas Rishonim, Darach kochav miYaakov, Ereinu v'lo atash, Ereinu v'lo karov, whether it's referring to David HaMelech, Melech HaMashiach, or both. So Bilam has a lot to say, and his words, of course, being delivered from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, are prophetic, and they settle into Am Yisrael's collective dictionary and collective vernacular. I want to talk about a pasuk that has germinated new meaning in 2025, and I will call it Nevuah, but let me first explain. Hein am kylbיא יקום וכרעיס נשא. The pasuk, of course, in this week's parsha, and it's a pasuk, I'll just take out the chumash to read the entire pasuk. It's a pasuk which, of course, was the name of our war in Israel. Hein am kylbיא יקום וכרעיס נשא. Just read the whole pasuk, because the end of the pasuk talks about what this Ari that arises will accomplish. He will not rest until Lo Yishkav Ad Yochal Teref, will not rest until his enemies and prey is consumed. V'dam Chalim Yishteh, and the blood of the victims of this war will be consumed, or will be engulfed. Now, what I mean its prophecy is as follows. This phrase, Am Kylbיא, Kari Yakum, Kylbיא יקום, not Ari, Kylbיא יקום, was chosen by military generals, was chosen by politicians. It was arbitrary. I don't believe HaKadosh Baruch Hu moved their hands and moved their minds. That would be HaKadosh Baruch Hu invading our Bechira Chavshis. There are many military exercises and wars in Israel that have different names that aren't biblically resonant and aren't based on psukim. The fact that this says a lot about where we are as a people, that we still feel that Tanakh speaks to such a large segment of our population. And I've said so often that so many Jews today, especially in Israel, I call them biblical Jews. I don't like the word traditional, I like the word biblical, because the prophecies of the Torah and the legacy of our people in this land still speaks to them. So all that is true. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu put these words in Balaam's mouth thousands of years ago, were they a prophecy specifically referring to 2025? I don't know. I don't read Tanakh that way. I don't read Tanakh that specifically. I don't believe that human decisions are prophesized about. Events are, and human beings take decisions that impact events. But the fact that politicians in general call this war hen am k'levii yakum, I'm not sure if you could say, well, it's exactly what Bilam intended. But there is a different type of prophecy, and to help you understand that type of prophecy, let me share with you a story of my Rebbe, Rav Amital, as I so often do. There is significant archaeological evidence that Rachel Imenu is not really buried in Beit Lechem in Kever Rachel. Much of it stems from the fact that there is a Beit Lechem up north, biblical Beit Lechem up north, and that is more likely to be along Yaakov's journey when he travels from Aram Naharayim in Vayishlach, which is Iraq, and ends up in Shechem, which is, of course, in north of Israel. Yaakov doesn't really reach the south of Israel. I know he reaches Efrat, but Efrat was named based on the assumption that Rachel is buried in Beit Lechem, but Derech Ephrata, not necessarily in the south where I live, 10 miles away from my home in Gush Etzion. So we want to ask Rav Amital, what does that mean about the Kedusha of Kever Rachel if she's not really buried there, if the facts don't match? And Rav Amital said something to me which changed my life. He said, even if she's not buried there, the collective tears of Am Yisrael shed at that location throughout thousands of years has sanctified that location, my words. Namely, there are two types of Kedusha. There's a Kedusha based on fact, and there's a populist Kedusha based on perception and behavior of Am Yisrael. And of course, for those briskers out there who want to hear halachic language, not prophetic and messianic language, that's the difference between halacha, which HaKadosh Baruch Hu decided Har Sinai, and minhag, which cropped up from Am Yisrael. And we revere minhagim, and we revere minhagim not only because it is the sociological glue that binds Jews in a stateless environment without a state and a currency and a flag. So the minhag is our flag, the minhag is our currency, the minhag is our social currency. It's more than that, because we believe that b'nei neviim heim, einam neviim b'nei neviim heim, and when minhagim emerge, and they stick, not just a minhag that comes and goes, it's based on deep, deep, visceral elements of halachic experience. So, just like minhag can create halachic validity, even when it isn't delivered from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Isra'usa Dila'ela, similarly, there is prophecy that Hashem delivers to Nevi'im that relate to particular events, and we have a hard time diagnosing which events they relate to. But then there's also, when Am Yisrael creates certain associations, call it backwards prophecy, we can take psukim in the Torah and lend them new meaning. So when Hashem delivered the term hen am k'levii yakum to Bilam, did he mean 2025 and the war, the June 13th war against Iran? I don't think so. But for the last month, Am Yisrael has been battling to defend our land. Am Yisrael has been battling to defend our people. Am Yisrael has been battling to defend the presence of Hashem in this world, and it's all the same. And the words that we have been using, the interface that we have been referring to, are these three or two resonant words, Am k'levii yakum, or k'levii yakum. Translated into English as roaring lion if you're listening to it in English, but I'll talk about what the phrase really means. So did Bilam intend it, or was it a prophecy forward running, that when it was said it meant these events? I don't know. I don't think so. But retrospectively, we clothed the events of the last month, which were historic and biblical and prophetic and messianic, we clothed it with this phrase of Am k'levii. And because we clothed it, all of a sudden there are meanings of that original phrase in the Torah which came to life, which surfaced thousands of years later. So whether it's classic nevuah or backwards nevuah, I don't mean backwards that it's illogical, but it's nevuah that flows backwards through time, I believe that there were certain associations with this pasuk that we witnessed and experienced during this war, Al Kiddush Hashem. And I want to itemize them, and I want to discuss four different aspects. I want to talk about the difference between a Lavi and an Ari. A Lavi is a young lion, and Ari is an adult male. Think Lion King. I want to talk about the difference between a lion emerging from nowhere and a lion waking up, which is the literal translation of Am k'levii yakum. What does it mean to wake up as opposed to coming out of nowhere? I want to talk about the nisim that the Medrash associates with the lion arising and the miracles in Jewish history that seem to manifest once again over this month of war with Iran, or 2.5 weeks of war with Iran. And then finally, I want to talk about the other announcement of Bilam Hein Am Livadad Yishkon Uvagoyim Lo Yischashav, and how the two declarations of Hein in Parashat Balak merged and overlapped during our war. There's a lot to talk about. I'm going to first close the window because it's very loud outside. I'm having a hard time hearing myself speak. I'll be right back. So, let's start with the difference between a lavi and the continuation of the pasuk. This military war and attack wasn't called a long name, Am K'Lavi Yakum V'Chari Yisnasa, but what is the difference between Lavi Yakum and Ari Yisnasa? So I'm referring to the Netziv, and the Netziv is crucial to understanding Parashat Balak. And even if you don't follow every single association, but just giving you a framework and a structure to understand some of the imageries and metaphors, the Netziv's forte. He mentions that a Levi is a small lion or a young lion, not necessarily a cub, but a lion. And the Ari is the already developed male lion with the mane and the roar and the big mouth nose. And the difference is between the Levi is raw strength, but the Ari frightens its prey and is the king of the jungle, not just because of its raw strength. And you can imagine there may be animals that are stronger than the lion. If you like the Nature Channel and Discovery Channel, you'll know what those animals are. I'm not going to give it away. But there's something about the lion's regality and the way it holds itself, and the way it stands there. Again, think Lion King on that precipice, and the hair and the mane and the face, and that imposes fear. But it's not just fear. It's something gory and grotesque and frightening, but regal and kingly and stately and dignified almost about the lion. How much of it do we reverse engineer into the lion because of everything we've seen in culture? But there's something about the lion that Netziv, who probably didn't see the Lion King, is already picking up naturally in a lion. And Am Yisrael, according to the Netziv, exhibits both in war, both the raw force and the military prowess, as well as the dignity, the regality, the confidence that frightens and that deters others, independent and regardless of the strength that we're able or not able to exert. And as I've spoken about so often, I think this war restored some of that. We suffered a rupture on October 7th, and it was internal rupture and also an external rupture, how we were viewed in the Middle East. And so much of our ability to build this land, and not just to deter threats militarily, but to build our country and our people, and to cooperate with others, and to bring others into this project, and who knows where this is all heading, the Abraham Accords, but hopefully this is messianic, and hopefully because redemption for Am Yisrael is international, the fact that there's international cooperation may be a harbinger of where we're heading. So much of it is how we're seen and how we're viewed, and after October 7th, our reputation, our image, our profile sunk. And despite all the victories since then, and the weakening of Hamas, and the hobbling of Hezbollah, and the routing of Syria, which I'll talk about, none of it restored that luster and that profile and that, I don't want to call it fear, but that aura, that the aura of the lion, not just the strength of the Levi. And those 12 days over the skies of Iran, I think, did restore it, both for ourselves, how we view ourselves, and how those in our vicinity view us. So it was called Am K'Lavi, but it was coupled with Am K'Lavi Yakum V'Cha'ari Yisnasa. There was kima, there was standing up, military force, and there was hitnasut. There was regality and restoring that dignity profile that deters our enemies and hopefully attracts them also to be part of this project of returning the chosen people to the land of Hashem. Number two, it doesn't say that they arrived, which would convey it wasn't there before. The Torah writes, Hine am K'Lavi Yakum. And even though it was dubbed the war rising lion, what it really means, and Rashi already senses this, Rashi reads the pasuk completely different. Rashi reads it more metaphysically, spiritually. We awaken in the morning and we say Kriya Shema, we grab mitzvahs like a lion, and then we end the day with another Kriya Shema. Maybe I'll talk about this in some other vein. But it's very clear according to Rashi, and it's already latent in the Midrashim. There's a Medrash Tanchum, I think, and some in Yudalid, that the lion is waking up. Now, lions wake up more dramatically than other animals because they sleep a lot. If you've ever been on a safari and you finally catch the lion, which is the highlight of the safari, because if you don't see the lion on the safari, you haven't been to the safari, chances are the lion is verschlafen. Chances are the lion is dozing and really isn't awake. So all you people out there who claim you were on safaris, think about whether you got the real lion or the verschlafen lion, the sleeping lion. Lions sleep a lot, which means they wake up a lot and they go back to sleep a lot. And you see them waking up. They don't wake up at dawn like some of the other animals. They wake up in a public fashion because in the middle of the day. So lions are associated with waking up, which means that even when they're sleeping, they're there, but they're just not awake. And we know that when we sleep, our brains continue to transmit information. Our brains are operating. That's why we dream. That's why we have subconscious activity. And the image of a lion awakening conveys the fact that we were there. We just weren't awake, and now we awoke. And that metaphor could be used many ways. I personally think it speaks to the reawakening of Jewish identity, of Jewish spirituality, not just on June 12th and 13th and onwards, but starting from October 8th. Whether it's people who are far, far away from any Jewish identity, who, and I'll talk about this later, in part because of anti-Semitism, have seen their Jewish identity surface and express itself and manifest itself, or whether it's people who don't perform mitzvahs the way we would want and like and hope. And this sleeping imagery is, of course, best captured by the pasuk in Shir HaShirim in Parakeh, Ani yeshena v'libi er, in which Am Yisrael says, I may be sleeping, but my heart is afire and ablaze with spirituality, with love for Hashem, with commitment to Jewish destiny. Yeshena min ha-mitzvos, Chazal say, but libi er bi'avas HaKadosh Baruch Hu, bi'avas Hashem, bi'avas Yisrael. And I think the war, this long war, has taught us that when we feel that certain Jews are gone and severed and divorced from Jewish history, they're sleeping, and it doesn't take much for that lion not to rise, but to awaken. And we have seen an awakening, and an awakening means it was always there. A development or a revolution means something that wasn't there. An awakening means something that was there, but just was masked by sleeping. So the first aspect of this pasuk in Parashat Balak, said thousands of years ago, which I think surfaced because, in part, or alongside the fact that we used words from Parashat Balak to describe our experiences, and therefore we created prophetic association, is A, we behaved not just like a Levi, but as an Ari. We weren't just Lakum, it wasn't just rising lion, but it was regal lion. And number two, there was an awakening of Jews who were connected to their Jewish roots, both in Israel and in Chutz La'aretz in different ways, who awoke during this period. And not just the 12-day war with Iran, but the culmination, because it's part of the culmination of what we've been struggling with for close to 2 years. The third aspect I want to speak about are two nisim in our past that Chazal, it's in Medrash Rabbin Shmos, I think in Tezvav, associate with this pasuk. And you'd be surprised how eerily similar some of these military victories in our past are to what we've had the last month. And again, the fact that we, Am Yisrael, use these terms to describe our war means that it created not divine prophecy, but it created Am Yisrael prophecy. The two miracles, the two victories, and there were many, many military victories throughout our history that Chazal could have associated with this pasuk of a rising lion, Heim Am K'Levy Yakom, or an awakening lion. One of them was Sisera, the war against Sisera, Barak and Devara, Sisera Melech Midian. And the pasuk the Medrash uses to describe Sisera's defeat that was like a lion awakening was Vayaham Sisera, that Sisera became bewildered and confused and overwhelmed. And I guess the lion, when it roars, it overwhelms and it becomes confusing and you don't know, you can't hear yourself, and there's a loud, loud, resonant roar. Now Sisera became confused and surprised and overwhelmed and fluxumed, as we'd say, because he was being attacked by heavenly stones and boulders falling from heaven. Over the last month, our enemies were confused and surprised because we struck with lightning pace. because we eliminated 30 military generals in a minute, because we sent drones and eliminated their air defenses overnight. And similar events happened to Hezbollah through the pager assault, and similar things happened in Syria when years and years of planning a proxy fell to dust in days, not weeks, days. And this was not Hashem sending boulders from heaven to bewilder. It was HaKadosh Baruch Hu giving us the intelligence and the intellect, the tools and the daring, the belief and the faith that we could pull off something so dramatic and so miraculous and so overwhelming. So Chazal associate the overwhelming bewilderment of Sisera with this pasuk, and the fact that we use this phrase to describe our war. Was it responsible for the fact that we were successful? That only HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows. But it certainly created historical continuity between the pasuk as it was used by Chazal thousands of years ago for Sisera and what happened to the Rishayim, Memshelas Zadon in Iran. The other military victory that this pasuk evokes, according to Chazal, in Medrash Rabbah, Shmos Rabbah, Parak Tesvav, I think Zayin or Vav, is the victory over Mitzrayim, the night of Makas Becharos. And what made that victory so impressive and captured by the imagery of Am Kelavi Yakum B'chari Yistasa? Chazal point to the fact that we stood sheltered in our homes, protected the night of Pesach from the Malach HaMavas, from the Mashchis, and all around us, outside of our home, the war was being fought, far away from us, and we were secluded and sequestered. Now in Mitzrayim, we were secluded and sequestered by HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence. Yavar Hashem l'ngof es Mitzrayim, v'lo yitena mashchis l'vo batechem l'ngof. Last month, we were secluded and sequestered in our miklatim, in our basements, as the victory was taking place in the heavens above Iran, and as HaKadosh Baruch Hu was creating a celestial victory. Now, no one is downplaying the terrible, terrible property damages and the thousands of people that are homeless. Certainly no one is downplaying those who are injured and are recovering from their injuries. And Allah Kama Vakama, no one is diminishing the 30 people who lost their lives, of the 30 or 31, I forget offhand. But broadly seen, we were sheltered. And broadly seen, HaKadosh Baruch Hu was Parisuk Hashalom Aleinu Ve'al Kol Amo Yisrael, just like he did in Mitzrayim. And the war wasn't fought in Eretz Yisrael primarily. The war was fought primarily in the skies of Iran and in the airfields of Iran. And the similar phenomena of Hein Am Kelavi Yakum, we got up, where Chazal get it from, we got up the next day in Mitzrayim, and we were safe and sound, even though Egypt had experienced a massacre and an apocalypse. Similar feelings, though not as complete, we're not at the end of history, it's not like Mitzrayim, but similar feelings where we defeated our enemies with relatively minimal damage. Hein Am Kelavi Yakum, when we got up safe in our homes. Again, there was damage, but nowhere near the numbers and expected casualties that our military generals were willing to accept as a price to avoid a nuclear holocaust. So these are three prophecies that came true, three associations with this pasuk that may not have been prophesied by Bilam in reference to 2025, but retrospectively, the miracles of 2025, as Am Yisrael experienced it, every single Yid in Eretz Yisrael kept saying, K'lavii Yakum, K'lavii Yakum, with some banners and posters and news, and K'lavii Yakum, rising line, in Chutz La'aretz. The final issue is the symbiosis of the merging between this Hein Am K'lavii Yakum and the other Hein, which is in Bilam's, I think it's in his first prophecy, there are 4 prophecies to Bilam, Hein Am Levadad Yishkonu V'Agim Leis Chashav. Same Hein, it's the same direct declaration, Hein. But in the first one, Bilam's referring to our abstinence and our intransigence, our courage and our faith, that we live alone, and people try to force us into conversion, into suspending our religious practice, and we stand defiant and it doesn't bother us. And according to that same Medrash and Shmos, because of that defiance in the first Hein, we're privileged to Hein Am K'lavii Yakum. Change around the words a little bit, and we were just as defiant and just as strong-willed, not in repelling attempts to convert us or to decree against our religion, but we stood alone for much of the last 2 years against a world which was seething and continues to seethe with hatred, venom, anti-Semitism, chance of death to the Jewish people, attacks on our people. Last night there was an attack on a shul in Melbourne, and we could have caved, and we could have been frightened, and yet Hein levadad yishkon, even though we were alone, uvagoyim lo yischashav. We did not care about what people think about us. Of course, we care diplomatically for practical reasons, and of course, we care because we want people to one day celebrate Am Yisrael so that they'll see HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Listen to my shir on the Netziv tomorrow. I'll talk about that a little bit. But ultimately, we're fighting a battle on behalf of the world, a moral battle, a historical battle to return the people of Hashem to the land of Hashem so that the world experiences universal welfare. And because of our heroism the last 2 years, Hein Am Levadad Yishkon Uvagoyim Lo Yischashav, we were zoch, I believe, to Hein Am Kylvיא יקום וכדו יisnasa. So, did Bilam intend this? I don't think so. But we created Nevuah. We're bigger Nevi'im than Bilam. We're B'nai Nevi'im, Nevi'im B'nai Nevi'im. And when Am Yisrael refers to Nisei Hashem with a phrase from Parashat Balak, then those Nisim reflect the pasuk in Parashat Balak and the interpretations of Chazal. And I believe that we're living through Nevuah. We may not have Nevi'im, but we are B'nai Nevi'im, and we all know, of course, that we're living through Nevuah. So we should continue to see Nevuos and Besuros Tavos, Yeshuos and Nachamos.